I never imagined I'd witness a fully grown, well-dressed woman. A woman who wore the title of Homeowners Association president like a crown, sprinting down Elmwood Street, arms flailing, screaming a noise somewhere between a siren and a banshee, while a cloud of golden, furious bees chased her through the crisp morning air. But that's exactly what happened last Tuesday, and the best part, the truly satisfying, popcorn-worthy part, was that she earned every single sting. See, folks around here in Copper Creek, they like to quote that tired old saying, karma is slow. I respectfully disagree. Sometimes, I've found, karma doesn't creep, it buzzes. Just a few months ago, this quiet little subdivision was my personal slice of heaven. Green lawns, quiet evenings, and a steady, therapeutic hum coming from the half-dozen hives I kept near the back fence. I bought this place 5 years ago, retiring early after 20 years in the Chicago Fire Department. 2 decades in that job teaches you 2 things. Life is fragile, and peace is priceless. I wanted the loudest sound in my life to be a distant lawnmower or the gentle, organized buzz of my bee colonies. I'd started beekeeping after my doctor told me I needed a hobby to keep the noise out of my head. And turns out, bees are the perfect teachers. They don't yell, they don't gossip, and they certainly don't start neighborhood wars. They just work, quietly, purposefully, with absolute loyalty to their hive. My wife, Clara, she loved the honey, but she'd tease me about the white suit, always saying I looked like a Michelin man who missed his flight to the moon. Still, she supported it. Every Sunday, I'd bring her fresh honeycomb for her toast, and she'd roll her eyes, pretending to be unimpressed. We were happy, and the neighborhood reflected that. Matching mailboxes, gleaming driveways, everyone smiled, everyone waved, and everyone, more or less, followed the rules. Then Brenda Sterling arrived. She moved into the corner house, the one with the imposing stone facade, in late spring. From day one, she treated Copper Creek like a personal fiefdom. She printed her own glossy, 14-page HOA amendment booklet before her moving truck was even fully unpacked. Within a week, she was marching around with a clipboard, inspecting things like the approved shade of taupe on your shutters and the precise angle of your porch swing. The first time we met, I was suited up, inspecting a hive. She marched straight up my driveway, hands on her silk-clad hips, sunglasses big enough to cover half her face. "Excuse me," she snapped, her voice already halfway to an accusation. "Are you aware you're harboring aggressive, potentially lethal insects this close to residential property?" I looked up from the hive, smiling through the mesh veil. "They're Italian honeybees, ma'am. Gentle as lambs, unless you upset them. They're federally protected, actually. They could sting a child," she shrieked, emphasizing the word. "Brenda," I replied, calmly lifting a frame buzzing with life. "We don't have any children on this street, and that hive is 20 feet from the nearest curb." Her jaw tightened. "That's President Sterling to you. And I'll be bringing this up at the next board meeting." Immediately, I just shrugged. "Feel free. I'll bring a jar of our award-winning wildflower honey." She glared, spun on her heel, and marched away. That was my first warning, and like any good beekeeper, I knew what happened when you disturbed a hive's queen. She brings the rest of the workers down on you. For a while, she left me alone, focusing on demanding people trim their hydrangea bushes into perfect cubes. I kept to myself, tended my bees, and my online orders, tools, custom frames, packaging jars, arrived like clockwork. Our regular courier, a guy named Rick, an honest guy, always tucked my boxes right behind the big clay planter by the front door. Then, one Monday, Clara called out, "Mike, did that specialized smoker kit arrive from Amazon yesterday?" I checked. No notification. Rick insisted he left it. We looked. Nothing. The planter was untouched, but the box was gone. I figured, okay, porch pirates. It happens. But then it happened again. And again. Always small packages. Always my beekeeping stuff, or the rare gadget I ordered. Never Clara's craft supplies. Never the neighbor's deliveries. Just mine. After the third time, I checked the outdoor camera feed, only to find the power cable had been neatly, deliberately unplugged. No struggle, no sign of damage. Whoever did it knew exactly what they were doing, and frankly, it felt personal. I mentioned it to my neighbor, Sam. Sam is one of those quiet, level-headed guys who notices everything but never speaks up. He shifted uncomfortably, glancing toward Brenda's fortress. You didn't hear it from me, Mike, he whispered. But I saw President Sterling pick up one of your boxes last week. Said she was taking it inside for temporary custodianship, citing a new amendment about unsecured deliveries. I actually laughed. She took my mail? Under the guise of a rule. Sam nodded grimly. That's when it clicked. This wasn't random theft. This was abuse of power disguised as civic duty. I could have marched over, knocked on her granite door, and raised hell, but years of crisis management taught me that anger only clouds the mind. Besides, I had something better than rage, strategy. The next day, I went to the HOA office and spoke to the secretary, Martha, a sweet, grandmotherly woman who genuinely loved the community. I asked if there were any official rules about package retrieval. She frowned. Oh goodness, no, Mike. That's a police matter, not HOA business. Why are you asking? I smiled. Just checking. Thanks, Martha. I realized Brenda wasn't enforcing rules. She was inventing them, using the HOA badge like a royal seal to justify her petty theft. Over the next few days, I observed her routine. Every morning, around 10:30, she'd take her fluffy white Maltese, Prince, on a surveillance stroll. She'd slow down at my porch, eyes darting around like a hawk, and if a package was there, she'd bend down, pick it up, pretend to read the label, and carry it toward her house before eventually circling back without it. I caught her one morning, half crouching. I was trimming a hedge. Need help carrying that, President Sterling? She jumped, clutching the box. Oh, I was just making sure no one steals it. Good to know you're volunteering for porch patrol, I said, my smile wide and utterly fake. She didn't smile back. She just muttered something about community standards and scurried away. That night, pouring myself a whiskey, Clara saw the look on my face. You're smiling, she observed. That's not your I forgive her smile, Mike. That's your I'm about to set a brilliant, terrifying trap smile. I grinned. Just thinking about bees, honey. She sighed. I don't want to know. And she was right. She didn't. Because if Brenda wanted to keep stealing, she was about to find out what happens when you mess with a hive that doesn't need lawyers or board meetings. It just needs nature and patience. By the time summer rolled in, I had lost 9 deliveries. 9. And every time, I replaced the camera, and every time, she found the power source. This last package, a small, expensive humidity sensor for a delicate new hive, was the final straw. It was time for the sting. I spent the evening building the perfect decoy. I took an old Amazon box, reinforced it, and labeled the outside in bold script, "Fragile, live royal jelly cultures. Handle with extreme care." Inside, I placed a tiny, military-grade GPS tracker and, crucially, a small, motion-triggered capsule of UV dye, the kind used to mark valuable scientific samples. If she opened it, it would leave a faint, but permanent, yellowish-green stain visible under certain light, and a stain that was a nightmare to wash off silk and satin. I slipped a note inside. This package contains property protected by federal law. Tampering may result in criminal charges, and possibly something far worse. The next morning, Rick dropped it off. I sat inside, live camera feed open on my tablet. 10:45 a.m. There she was. Same pink blazer, same imperious gait. She glanced around furtively, spotted the box, and that smug, entitled little grin, the kind that screams I am above the rules, tugged at the corners of her mouth. She scooped it up, dainty as a cat lifting a fish, and vanished. 10 minutes later, the GPS pinged, stable inside her garage. I grabbed my keys, drove over, and found her clipping roses in her immaculate front garden, acting perfectly innocent. "Morning, Brenda," I said, cheerful as a bird. "Nice day for rose pruning. Also, nice day to steal mail, isn't it?" Her eyes flashed. "Excuse me." I held up my phone, showing the tracking dot. "Funny thing, my missing package seems to have wandered right into your garage." She froze, shears in mid-clip. "Oh, that one. I was just about to return it. I thought it was addressed to me." "Addressed to Michael Harris, for 12 Copper Creek," I stated flatly. "You thought that was you?" She stammered, pulling her hand away from the shears. "There must have been a mix-up with the numbering." "Yeah, the mix-up was you thinking you're the U.S. Postal Service." I looked pointedly at her hand. "You know, that package was marked with a sensitive chemical indicator, just to make sure it wasn't opened accidentally. You might want to check your palms, Brenda." She glanced down. The faint, Sickly yellow-green stain was already blooming across the knuckles of her expensive gardening glove. The look on her face was priceless, a mixture of panic and deep, acidic hatred. She gasped, dropped the shears, and ran inside, slamming the door. That afternoon, the HOA's nervous vice president, Ted Williams, a poor man with a permanent sweat stain on his collar, called me. Mike, Brenda filed a complaint. Says you're stalking her, setting traps. Ted, I cut him off. She's stolen 9 of my packages. She just got caught literally red-handed, or yellow-handed, in this case. I have video proof and GPS data. Want me to send it to the board, or straight to the sheriff's department for mail fraud? Let's not escalate, he pleaded. We'll have an emergency meeting tonight. Let's resolve this quietly. Quietly, of course, is HOA speak for protect the loudest, most volatile person. I showed up that night, carrying my evidence on a flash drive. The clubhouse room was cold, beige, and felt exactly like a budget courtroom. Brenda, dramatically, was wearing a thick neck scarf and a wrist bandage, trying to look like a victim of a high-speed car crash. He's been spying on me, setting traps, spreading lies, she hissed at the board. I was only safeguarding the community from unsecured items. I waited patiently, then held up my flash drive. Here's the footage of you walking up my porch, taking the box, and opening it in your garage. And Ted, perhaps you noticed the slight discoloration on President Sterling's hands this afternoon. The room went silent. Brenda's mouth opened and closed like a goldfish. That's edited. Ted squinted at the still frame on my tablet. Her face, her smug expression, clearly visible. That looks pretty real, Brenda. Sam, my quiet neighbor, let out a muffled chuckle from the back. I was protecting the neighborhood from dangerous, unauthorized materials, she screeched. Dangerous royal jelly, I deadpanned. Very heroic. A few muffled laughs rippled through the room. Ted sighed. Brenda, we cannot condone removing items from private property. This is a clear overreach. Then the HOA needs new rules about unattended packages, she shot back, crossing her arms. We'll discuss it in the next term, Ted said, rubbing his forehead. The meeting ended without a formal verdict against her, but I didn't need one. The court of public opinion had delivered the sting. When Brenda stormed out, everyone watched, some shaking their heads, others smirking. The queen bee of the HOA had been caught trying to steal honey, and she was dripping in humiliation. Back home, Clara was waiting. How'd it go? Let's just say I think she's highly allergic to embarrassment, I smiled. But she's not the type to learn from it. Honey, she's the type to double down. And I was right. The next morning, a new HOA notice was taped to my door. It read, effective immediately, no resident may keep insects, hives, or any form of pollinating colonies within Copper Creek grounds. I laughed so hard I nearly fell off the porch. She wanted to declare war? Fine. But she forgot one crucial detail. I'd registered my hives with the county agricultural program 3 years ago. HOA rules don't override state agriculture law. She could file all the complaints in the world, and I'd still have my bees. The battle lines were drawn. Brenda had her HOA bylaws and her clipboard army. I had patience, proof, and about 60,000 buzzing reasons not to mess with me again. I decided to stop playing defense. I moved one of my smaller, quieter hives from the back to the front porch, setting it a few feet from the mailbox, blending it in with a few bright lavender bushes. I told Clara it was for better pollination strategy. She just gave me that look. I ordered a bait package, organic maple syrup samples, fragile. The label was bright red. Brenda was a creature of habit. 10:30 a.m. There she was. She paused halfway up the sidewalk, clearly debating the risk. Is that a hive? Are those bees? Should I risk it? Then, predictably, the arrogance won. She marched right up to my porch, muttering something about unauthorized structures. The hive buzzed louder, a soft, low warning. She reached for the red package, eyes darting nervously at the few dozen bees circling the lavender. One landed on her expensive silk sleeve. She froze, then waved her hand frantically, the cardinal sin of beekeeping. The sound that came next was pure, unadulterated schadenfreude. A high-pitched, strangled yelp followed by a flurry of motion. Brenda dropped the box, stumbled backward, and swatted wildly as 3 bees, offended by the sudden violence, went straight for her head. Prince, the dog, yipped and bolted toward the street, dragging his diamond-studded leash. "Help! They're attacking me," she shrieked. From my living room, sipping coffee, I murmured, "No, Brenda. They're defending themselves." By the time she made it to the sidewalk, half a dozen more workers had joined the chase, a furious golden halo around her head. She sprinted down Elmwood Street, swatting, yelling, the dog barking like a distant car alarm. The emergency HOA meeting that night was packed. Everyone had heard about the bee attack. Brenda arrived with her hand wrapped in a bandage the size of a catcher's mitt, in a dramatic posture that suggested she'd just survived a trench warfare assault. "Fellow residents," she announced, her voice strained. "I was viciously attacked this morning by a swarm of aggressive insects kept illegally by Mr. Harris." I raised my hand calmly. "They're not aggressive, Ted. They're pollinators and legally registered with the county. I have the paperwork." Brenda's face twitched. "Paperwork doesn't change the fact that I was stung on community property." "Actually," I said, pulling out my phone, "you were on my porch, violating a clear boundary. Here, let me play the video." Crystal clear footage of her trespassing, reaching for the box, and then her frantic panic as the bees swarmed, the sound of her initial shriek filling the room like a siren. Someone in the back snorted. Someone else coughed to hide a laugh. You can't record me without consent," she sputtered. "It's a publicly facing porch, Brenda," I replied, putting the phone away. "Perfectly legal. Thanks again for proving my case that you were trespassing." Again, the laughter wasn't subtle this time. Even Ted cracked a slight smile. Brenda stormed out, muttering threats. I went home. I knew she wouldn't stop. The more she fought, the more people mocked her, and the more her ego demanded retaliation. I knew she'd make one last, desperate mistake. I just had to keep my hives humming and my cameras rolling. It came a week later. Around 11:30 p.m., Clara nudged me awake. "Mike, did you hear that?" Outside, the motion light flickered on. Through the window, I saw her. Brenda, skulking in a dark hoodie, dragging a plastic canister. "Please tell me that's not," Clara whispered. "Pesticide," I finished grimly. "Yep, she's going for chemical warfare." I crept to the garage and checked the camera feed. She was kneeling near the hive on the porch, unscrewing the cap. But here's what she didn't know. The hive on the porch was the oldest one, due for replacement. The active hives, the ones buzzing with 10,000 workers, had already been relocated that evening across the street, nestled safely behind Sam's garden fence. Sam, the quiet neighbor who got tired of her nonsense, had happily agreed to host them overnight for pollination services. So, while Brenda prepared to launch a full chemical attack on an empty box, the real army was resting quietly in her direct line of fire. She unscrewed the cap, muttering to herself, "Let's see you buzz now, you little monsters." She gave the decoy box a vicious kick. And then it happened. A dark, furious cloud rose from Sam's fence line, twisting like a column of smoke. The hum deepened, vibrating through the quiet street. Brenda froze, flashlight beam wobbling wildly, catching hundreds of glittering wings. She screamed, a long, tearing sound, dropped the can, and ran for her SUV, waving her arms, tripping over her own shovel. The swarm, responding to the disturbance, the noise, the human panic, followed her in a furious, buzzing halo. The whole block woke up. Porch lights snapped on like dominoes. Sam stepped out in his bathrobe, coffee mug in hand, watching the scene with utter bewilderment. "Everything all right out there?" he called out deadpan. Brenda bolted past him, shrieking, "You're trying to kill me." She reached her SUV, dove inside, slammed the door, and then the vehicle lurched forward, zigzagging down Elmwood Street, horn blaring, headlights swinging like a panic alarm, because a handful of bees had made it inside with her. I grabbed my phone and dialed the non-emergency line. "Yeah, hi," I said calmly. "It's Michael Harris on Copper Creek. We've had another incident involving our HOA president." "No, not serious. But you might want to send someone before she crashes into a mailbox." 10 minutes later, flashing red and blue lights painted the houses. Brenda was sitting on the curb, paramedics tending to a few new stings on her neck. Her hair was tangled, her face streaked with tears and dirt. The sheriff, the same one who'd checked my registration, just shook his head at me. "Mr. Harris. Busy night." "You could say that," I replied. "Looks like she tried to vandalize county-registered property again." He chuckled. "Well, She'll have a hard time explaining the trespassing footage again. Also, ma'am, he said gently to Brenda, who was glaring at me. Trespassing with a chemical substance is a serious offense. We'll be filing a full report. You can't do this. I'm the HOA president, she wailed. The sheriff raised an eyebrow. Not after tonight, you're not. Brenda Sterling didn't show her face for days. The next morning, the doorbell camera footage, the frantic screaming, the golden cloud, the chaotic escape, was viral on the neighborhood group chat, titled, "The Queen of Copper Creek Declares War on Bees and Loses." Ted Williams resigned as vice president the following week, citing a sudden need to retire from civic duty. The rest of the board voted unanimously to suspend Brenda pending an investigation. Within days, word spread that she'd been fined by the county for unauthorized pesticide use and multiple counts of trespassing. 2 weeks later, her husband, poor man, put their house up for sale. When the moving truck finally arrived, I was out front, weeding my lavender. Brenda stood by the curb, wearing massive sunglasses to hide the fading stings. She hesitated for a moment, then muttered, "You think you've won, don't you? You think you're clever." I wiped my hands on my jeans, looking straight at her. "No, Brenda. I think the neighborhood won." Her lip trembled, but she said nothing more. As the truck pulled away, a few bees drifted lazily in the air. One landed softly on her car window. She swatted it in panic, accelerating like she was fleeing a crime scene. A month later, I received a small, handwritten letter. Shaky, uneven, but unmistakably her cursive. "Michael, I know you think I got what I deserved. Maybe I did. The doctor said I was lucky. But I've had time to think about this place, about you, about the bees. You were right. I wanted to control everything. Maybe because everything else in my life was falling apart. When my husband left last winter, the HOA became the only thing I could run. I see now how pathetic that sounds. You don't have to forgive me. I just wanted you to know. The new owners seem nice. Take care of them the way you took care of your hives." Brenda. It wasn't an apology, exactly, but it was close enough. I left a small jar of wildflower honey on her old porch. No note, just the golden glass catching the sunlight. The HOA was eventually dissolved and converted into a voluntary neighborhood committee. No fines, no random rules, just common sense. Sam joked that we finally got bee government. My jars of honey became the unofficial peace symbol of Copper Creek, each one labeled Hive Justice, made in Copper Creek. I now lead small, informal workshops for the neighborhood kids. One afternoon, little Timmy Jenkins asked, "Mr. Mike, aren't you scared they'll sting you?" I smiled beneath my veil. "No, kiddo. They don't sting unless they're scared. Bees just protect what's theirs, like any good neighbor." I realized that peace wasn't about isolating yourself. It was about finding the courage to defend your boundaries when someone tries to poison them. And sometimes, the universe doesn't need your fists or your rage to fight back. It just needs a hive full of honest, hardworking bees and a little patience. As the sun sets over Copper Creek, the only sound you hear is the steady, protective hum of the colony. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes, my friends, it simply buzzes until you finally learn to listen. If you've ever had to deal with a Brenda or a Karen in your life, someone who tried to dictate how you live, how you grow, or even how you breathe, I want to hear about it. Did you fight fire with fire? Or did you, like me, find a more creative, slightly fuzzy form of retribution? Drop your best HOA nightmare story in the comments below. Like this video if you think my bees deserve a medal. Subscribe if you want more stories about finding peace in the chaos. And hit that notification bell, because you never know what kind of karma is buzzing just around the corner.